Hello and welcome to the second Twine workshop. In part 1 I focused mainly on the mechanics and the coding aspect of using Twine. This time I'll be looking at the mechanics of English and creative writing. We'll use a past exam paper to guide our writings and vet our work against the mark scheme. This is not intended to be a revision aid, just a fun way to increase your awareness of the GCSE assessment objectives when writing anything, and a bit of a look into what makes for effective creative writing. There are times when I will give you the opportunity to hit pause and do some writing on your own, so be ready to get creative. With that, let's get started. English Language Paper 1 asks a series of questions based on a given excerpt. This sample paper uses a snippet from the excellent A Sound of Thunder by Ray Bradbury. Section B has a task thematically similar to the text in Section A, this one being time travel. Before we start planning, what are the examiners looking for, and what does that mean for us in writing creative, and in this case speculative, fiction? The key words used in the mark scheme are compelling, convincing communication. Of these points, extensive and ambitious vocabulary is arguably the most important aspect in meeting these criteria. With these, the other points will occur automatically. But how can you develop an extensive vocabulary? Well, the best way by far is through reading, and unfortunately, especially the boring books you are forced to read in class. How books were written and how they're written today is very different. Think about the lengthy descriptions given to these settings in the core texts in GCSE English, the marshes in Great Expectations, or 19th century London in Jekyll and Hyde, or the decoration or the inhabitants of Gateshead in Jane Eyre. These are emphatic and expressive. The word choice and structure paint a very specific picture, and while doing so provide important details on the events of the book. Read these books and take their words. Don't rely on a vocabulary list. I find personalising the words, make them true about things about you, works better. This is a bit beyond the remit of this video, but it's something to be aware of when we do our writing. The rest of the mark scheme is focused on technical accuracy, spelling, punctuation, sentence structure and so on. We'll have a look at these also as we go along. So before we move on to the task proper, our key points are compelling, convincing and accurate. Let's bear this in mind throughout. And for one final thought, compelling, convincing and accurate writing is not impossible. It's not a Herculean task, and it's something that absolutely everyone is capable of. You can write well. It might just need a little practice, and in making games for your friends and family, you'll get practice and provide people with engaging game experiences, so everyone wins. Section B provides a photo and a question prompt, usually linked thematically to the sample text in Section A. The material we have been provided with is a black and white photograph of what looks like a museum or a hall. In fact, this is a photo of Grand Central Terminal in New York taken in 1954. It's a striking image of sunlight bursting through windows onto the crowds of people below. Of course, you may not have known what this building is, but I imagine a train or bus station or a museum was among the guesses you made. The task is simple. Your local newspaper is running a creative writing competition and the best entries will be published. You'll have two choices and can either write a story about time travel as suggested by this picture, or describe life as you imagine it in 200 years' time. Of these two, the first is by far the easiest as the photo's done half the work for you. Our task tells us that we are writing to a general audience, so the story should be appealing to anyone and should avoid esoteric references or specialist subject knowledge. We will not be writing an entire story in this session, but we'll be looking into building a solid foundation that meets the requirements set in the GCSE mark scheme. Let's jump into our Twine workspace and insert the image as a basis for our story. Head off to twineo.org, select Run in Browser or download the program to your PC. Add a new story and call it whatever, a time travel story for example. Let's go to our starting block and change the name to Start. As I mentioned in the previous video, this makes a nice reference for us to refer to later in the story. Now let's import a picture. Open up Google and do an image search for Grand Central Terminal 1954. Find this image. Right click and select Copy Image Location. Return to Twine, and in the main body of our start box type img src equals quote marks, link text, quote marks, and we're out. Let's test our image by clicking anywhere outside the text box and then clicking play. One thing I didn't mention in the previous video is formatting. The adventure game I used in the previous video used stock fonts on a black background. This time, let's mix things up with some colours. To do this, we need to adjust our story style sheet. Back in our Twine workspace, click on the little triangle next to your story name in the bottom left corner, and then Edit Story Style Sheet. The default is white text on black in the Georgia font. For a little authenticity, let's choose a font that looks like newsprint and a softer background colour. Whatever we write in here changes the default settings. There are loads of variations of things to try. Today we're just focusing on the font and the background colour. Type in TW-story, curly bracket, font-family courier, font-size 20px, colour white, background colour light blue, curly brackets to close. These should be fairly self-explanatory. The first three dictate the font style, size and colour, and the final line dictates background colour. Again, these can be experimented with, and you can go very specific with your colour choices with RGB colour codes and the like. For example, if you want to use the official Centre for Computing History blue, swap light blue for #0E83CD. If you want to know more, just search Twine Harlow font colours to get more information. Harlow is the default Twine engine. Others are available that add or remove features. I'll be using this one as it's stock with Twine. If you change the background and it's hard to read your link text, you can change it in the style sheet with tw-link.enchantment-link, curly bracket, colour name, close curly bracket. Now we've changed our style sheet, let's see how it's looking. Click out, click play. We have our new background colour and evocative photo, but no text. Yet. Let's set the scene. In an opening, we need to paint an image in the mind of our reader. We need to establish the wheres, the whats, the whys, the hows, the whos and all that stuff. We can focus on the sort of characters that inhabit the world, or we can focus on describing the world itself, or any number of ways in combination. Let's have a look at some examples of setting the scene. Let's start with George Orwell's 1984. There's an example of evocative sensory language in the first line, calling up a musty, miserable smell, an unhealthy, unkempt and uncared for smell. A repurposed billboard colour poster establishes an overbearing and overwhelming dominance. Economy drive, hate week. Tell us about the goings on without needing to be too explicit. That there are ongoing, scheduled, authorised events. Alien, but understandable to us. The repeat exposure to the face of Big Brother and his shifting gaze drives home the hopelessness and the lack of escape for the inhabitants of this world. What's your reaction to this text? How has it made you feel? Whatever you felt, that's the tone of the piece. A bit bleak, I'd imagine. Let's look at a very different example. The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. This is a very strong contrast to the grim surroundings of the previous example. How has this made you feel? There's a powerful feeling of decadence, bohemia, luxury. There's a great deal of sensory language here. What are some of the things that you can see, smell, hear, touch and taste in this passage? How do they combine to create the feelings that you've encountered? It's almost as if they are on another world, like distinct and distant from the incredible hustle and bustle of London in the late 1800s. There's also an amazing metaphor using bees to mirror the to and fro of those living within the city. This is what we want to aim for in our compelling, convincing prose. So back to our image. A picture speaks 1,000 words, but we still need to throw in a fair few of our own to fill in the gaps. The image provides the visuals, but we need to develop the other senses, the sounds, smells, taste, touch of the scene. What sounds might there be? This place is made entirely of stone. There are windows to buy tickets from, an information kiosk. Heels will click on the marble floor. The chatter of commuters will echo off the walls. Chirpy, cheery voices will be heard from the women in the information kiosk. Money will change hands. Tills will ring. Tickets will be punched torn. Briefcases popped open. Scarves will be dropped. Gates will open and close. Timetables will be unfolded. Service windows will be slid closed. Coughs, snuffles, trips and fumbles. All the fun of the fair. Let's consider the smells and tastes of this environment. There are lots of people, so we might smell freshly laundered suits, or perhaps the opposite. Perhaps someone has just finished smoking a cigarette. Maybe an old lady is fumbling for a mint imperial in her handbag. It could be late in the year, and the autumnal air is crisp. Outside it may have been raining, and the smell of wet brick is all around. Aftershaves, perfume, leather, sweets, wood, varnish. We could also mention what's not there, like the smell of traffic outside. Finally, the touch of the place. Rough woolen overcoats, textured leather briefcase handles, the lining of a hat sat snugly on a head, the unyielding floor underfoot, the glossy timetable smooth on the fingers, a smooth, polished pocket watch hanging from a chain, loose change in the pockets of thick pressed trousers, 3 neat and 1 ragged edge of a freshly torn ticket. How does this photo make you feel? I find this quite otherworldly. The colossal room looks like it was made for giants. There's something quite stirring in the huge shafts of light coming in the window. It's like some sort of heavenly waiting room. What's the story of all these people? Where are they going? Why? What motivates them? Rely on your own experiences. What does a bus terminal sound like? Or a train station? What are the sights, sounds, smells, tastes and touch while waiting for the school bus, if you have one? Maybe now would be a good time to hit pause on the video, press K if you're watching on a computer, and jot down some notes about how you feel about this picture, and your own experiences with places that this reminds you of. An important point to remember, we are not writing a novel, we are talking directly to the reader, the player, who is an active participant in the story. Therefore, we will be writing in the second person, and in addition, we don't know who the protagonist is. They could be anyone. That's not to say we can't put a few clues in there to help the player create an avatar in their head when playing. We can put a few choice words in that will separate the player personally from the character they are operating, or vice versa. Similarly, we don't know the gender of the player. We could set this up as a question to the player at the start of the story and use that as a variable to automatically complete sentences later in the game. Furthermore, we will be using present tenses as the actions will be ongoing at the time we tell the story. We also don't want to write too much on each page, keep it to a paragraph or 2 at most. We have a lot of writing points, but we don't need to use all of them on a page, nor do we need to use them at all. You enter the station. Fix this sentence. Stepping out of the cool autumn air and the threat of rain, you enter the station. Well, we have a fronted adverbial phrase that got some sensory language in there. As a quick reminder, a fronted adverbial is a word or phrase that goes at the start of a sentence that modifies or describes the following action or state. For example, once in a blue moon, I can see shooting stars from my bedroom window. The phrase once in a blue moon modifies I can see shooting stars from my bedroom window by explaining how often it happens, in this case very rarely. They can be just one word, for example, cautiously, she sneaked past her parents' bedroom. Why not just put the adverb at the end? She sneaked past her parents' bedroom carefully. Or in the middle, she carefully sneaked past her parents' bedroom. Have a look at the 3 sentences. What do you think the differences are? Why might an author choose one over the other? The answer is dramatic effect. Word order matters. By putting it at the front, you are giving the reader a cue on how to interpret the rest of the sentence. By reading cautiously, the reader has opened a folder in their mind that associates that word with their own experiences. When they read cautiously, they think danger, making yourself small, walking softly. That time they were caught doing something naughty and they shouldn't have. Adverb position is a very interesting topic, and while I won't be going into detail here, have a look at these sentences and see what difference the placement makes to you, the reader. Perhaps read them aloud to yourself and place an emphasis on the adverb. Okay, back to our starting sentence. What else can we do? The station. That's not very fun. How about a name? Stepping out of the cool autumn air and the threat of rain, you enter Grand Central Temporal Terminal, because we're doing a time travel story. This is alright. Feel free to embellish it all you want, reshape it, rearrange it, delete it. But let's put this at the top of our page as the first thing that the player reads. It's fairly engaging, but feel free to add your own interesting opening sentence that will hook a player. And why not experiment with adverbials? So the player is through the door. What's next? Well, we need to establish the setting, do some world building, hint at what's coming next, and give some options. Let's use our ideas and sensory language to add detail to our setting. What information do we want to relay to the player? Think back to our diagram. There are people, big windows, sounds echoing off the solid walls. It's a station, so there will be gates leading to the tracks. Here's a starting sentence for you to get to work on. People wandered in the hall. It's hideous and boring. Have a go at fixing it yourself. Expand it, reshape it, disassemble it, and create something that is communicative and engaging for the player. You don't need to keep any of the words either. You can change every part of it and still transmit the idea to the reader. Can you think of a synonym that you can use in place of people, wander, or hall? Get a decent 3 or 4 sentence paragraph together. Use our diagram from before and the notes you wrote on your own reactions to the image. Hit pause and start again once you have something that you like. Travellers and staff mill around the ticketing hall, illuminated by shafts of light beaming from windows set high into the ceiling. Heels click on the marble floor, and a low murmuring from numerous private conversations echo off the walls, making a few dozen people sound like 100. The burnished brass turnstiles to the platform are still locked as the machinery beyond resets after the last batch of travellers. The impatient check their pocket watches, the nervous clutch their tickets, the bored reread a brochure. In my idea, I incorporated the sights and sounds of the hall with the people within. There's an alliterative burnished brass, simile in like 100. There are 3 independent sentences linked with semicolons at the end. This might irk some people, but it is grammatically sound. I could have used full stops, but the rhythm would have not been the same. The listing combines them into 3 distinct groups sharing the same experience. How can we convey to the reader this is not present time? We've mentioned pocket watches as a means of timekeeping in the story. The idea of polished brass also suggests days gone. Can we give any more hints? Or shall we just outright tell the player? Being as this is a time travel story, it might be pertinent to tell the reader when the story starts. I'll leave that up to you. So we've set our scene and done a bit of descriptive writing. Let's lead our player into the story. We need some options for the player to choose from. Let's give them the choice of going straight to the ticket counter or going to get some information first. Square bracket, option 1, which is go to ticket window, square bracket, and same thing for the second option, go to information kiosk. That will open 2 new boxes for us to write in. Now that we've talked about setting, let's start thinking about the people in our world, starting with the staff of the station, and maybe use some rhetorical devices. As I'm sure you know by now, rhetorical devices are a series of skills used by authors to create a reaction in the reader. I'm going to set you a challenge. In the next writing section, I want you to use alliteration and a simile. A reminder, alliteration is the use of words that start with the same sound, close to each other. The ragged rascal ran round the rugged rocks. A simile is likening one object to another and provide a clearer description for the reader. She had blue eyes. That's okay, but her eyes were as blue as the ocean is a more compelling description. Like and as are often used in similes. So let's go to the information counter and describe the scene and staff. Our character needs to get to the information kiosk and talk to the staff. We will need a description for both. Your character walks to the kiosk. How? In what manner? Are they in a rush? Do they walk slowly? Are they amazed at the size of the place? Are they excited? How can we show and not tell the character's feelings? You are excited. You walk to the information kiosk. It has an interesting clock. Yuck. 3 separate sentences. These can be effective to ramp up tension, but that's not our intention. We want to provide information. You excitedly walk to the information kiosk, which looks interesting. This is only mildly better in that we have converted 3 sentences into 1 complex sentence. You walk with a spring in your step towards the information kiosk, its clock attracting your attention like a beacon. Getting there. We've inferred excitement by replacing an excited walk with a spring in your step, meaning you are happy or excited about something. The clock beacon simile is okay, but it doesn't provide much information about the design of the interesting clock. Walking with a spring in your step across the lobby, you fixate on the round clock atop the kiosk as it rotates lazily, the brass inlays and etchings casting rippled reflections on the marble floor. This I prefer, you may not. That's great and entirely your prerogative. I encourage you to mangle, crush, and resurrect whatever I write on here. So now we're at the counter. What can you see? Think back to our own experiences. If you can't think of anything, have a look at this image of a train station ticket office. There are brochures, pamphlets, posters, informational signs, timetables, a glass display case with assorted paraphernalia, a ticket window. Not all of these things are present in our picture, but that doesn't mean we can't use them or allude to them in some way. Okay, I'm going to take a break and let you do some writing. Have a go at describing the information kiosk. Maybe think about the staff's appearance too. What are they wearing? How are they presented? Let's have one really solid paragraph following on from Reflections on the Marble Floor. So, what have you come up with? My idea? The varnish of the wooden counter has started to wear away from the forearms of endless leaning patrons. A pen is chained to its holder, set into a note block. Timetables are neatly arranged in a dispenser. The one at the front is dog-eared from repeated viewings. Behind the counter sits a young woman in a navy suit. Brass buttons and a gold name tag stand out from the dark fabric. Back straight and shoulders pushed back, she sits with the company-mandated exacting posture, like an instructional diagram ready to attend. I've used show not tell to suggest that the information kiosk gets a lot of use, that there might be a lot of information taken at once, and that not everyone wants to be burdened with a timetable. I've also suggested that the station is managed by a company that expects exactness from its staff. And we put it all together and give a couple more choices to the player. We'll give them the option to take a timetable or talk to the staff. If we take a timetable, it might be worth going back to create a variable for the timetable so the program knows you have it. You never know, there might be a point in the story when you need it. Look at my previous video on how to create variables and manage inventory in your game. For our final stage, let's think about dialogue. In our talk to the clerk text box, how is the young woman going to talk to the player? What do we already know from her description? She has access to information, she wears a uniform, she conducts business in a very specific and formal way, so we can assume she'll be fairly formal, precise, and keen to aid the player with information. We can also assume she works from a script and has said the same thing many, many times. What will be the first words she says? What is the most formal, polite greeting you can think of? Start your block off with a quotation mark and let the character speak. I'm going for, "Good morning, thank you for visiting Grand Central Temporal Terminal. How might I be of service to you today?" I've given a bit more information on our clerk here too. If you've established gender as a variable, you could make the first sentence end with the input. For example, "Good morning, madam," or "Good morning, sir," or whatever your preferred title might be. The story I'm making here will be available as a link in the description below if you'd like to see how I made the question prompt and subsequently called it later in the story. Let's move on with our dialogue scene. The clerk has given her opening gambit and we need to respond. Get ready to press pause again because I want you to play out the rest of this conversation. The player doesn't have much of a clue what's going on. In your text, write a dialogue between the customer, that's the player, and the clerk. Specify where and when you want the player to go and their motivations for wanting to go there. Perhaps in your story you want the player to go back to medieval England and see Camelot, or they want to go to Roswell, New Mexico in 1947 to see the UFO crash. Or perhaps they have something in their recent history they want to go back and observe. It's up to you. Hit pause and get back to me when you're ready. Alright, so I've decided that my character has a fixation on the Wild West and wants to see it for himself. My dialogue goes like this. Punctuating dialogue can be tricky. When someone new starts speaking, start a new line with a quotation mark and a capital letter. If there is no tag, like she said, he said, they asked, end with a full stop and a quote mark. If there is a tag, end the quote with a comma. If the same person is talking, continue the text on the same line. If your character has loads to say, like full paragraphs, don't put quote marks at the end of a paragraph that's going to be followed by another paragraph of text. Keep an eye on your comma and capital usage to keep things clear. This is exactly what examiners are looking for, as it's a pretty good indicator of how well you know your punctuation. I think that'll do for me. I've established where my character wants to go and why, given a bit more information about the clerk and the player, and we've set up a decent foundation for our story. And with that, our foundation is pretty much done. If you continue your story, the player will need to buy a ticket, travel through time, have an adventure, choices, consequences, and all that jazz. Remember, if you're a bit hazy on the coding aspect of Twine, then go back and watch the first Twine video, or look at the various wikis floating around on the internet. Before we wrap up, let's take a little time for reflection. This is something that should always be done when finishing any piece of work. Take time to look back over what's been done, how you did it, and whether you've met the criteria you set yourself. If there is any doubt, go back over your text. Look at some of the words you've used. If you say, that sounds a bit boring, why not use the internet to find a synonym and use that instead? If you're unsure you've used correct punctuation, check the rules online. Have you met the requirements as established in the mark scheme? Is what you've written so far compelling, convincing, and is it accurate? Have you experimented with vocabulary you might not usually use? Have you been keeping an eye on your punctuation, especially during dialogue? Is there anything that does not look right? Most importantly, are you happy with it? If yes, that's great, keep going. If not, that's also great, because you obviously care about your work to be critical enough about it. But get someone else to give you feedback, otherwise you might go insane tweaking and retweaking your work. Well, I think I'll leave you to it. As always, don't take my ideas as absolutes. Check other sources for what they say on creative writing, dialogue, punctuation, and coding Twine. There are loads of great videos out there. I always recommend learning from various sources. Well, if you have any comments, queries, quibbles, feel free to drop me a comment below or send an email. Similarly, if you've made an excellent game, we at the Centre for Computing History would love to read it. You can save your file to disk and email it to me at dan@computinghistory.org.uk. And if you're ever in the centre and fancy having a go at Twine, just give me a shout and I'll give you a few pointers in person. Once again, thanks for watching and good luck with creating awesome games.